so many thought-provoking comments and suggestions that have been going on. I mean, this has truly been an experience that I will not forget. But ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you all today in support of this bill. And my reasoning is going to be, obviously is not as colorful or as passionate as some of the other members today, but I feel like it's still a responsible and reasonable approach towards what we're trying to do with this legislation. The gentleman from Bullitt, dear friend, and did an excellent job with this today. I spent a lot of time talking about this bill. You know, I come from a family of educators, and intellectual freedom is something that's very, very important to us. Very important. But I'm also a father. I've spent almost a quarter of a century in the public school system, working with kids. I can't tell you all how many times I've uttered the phrase, "That's not appropriate." Probably millions. That's not appropriate. This bill, to me, creates a process where our schools and our families work in a partnership to make sure that the materials in the schools match up with what our values look like. Now, I know I just made a statement that what are our values? There's 100 people in here, and we all value different things. But our principles behind what's appropriate for kids, what's developmentally appropriate for kids, we have to adhere to that. And I can tell you all that what I know about what's in schools, there are some titles, there are some books that should not be there. There are some titles of books and there's some content that I do not want my children, my 15-year-old, my 10-year-old, seeing. It shouldn't be there. Now, I'll tell you, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about literary freedom, it's very similar to artistic freedom. And, you know, a lot of artists sometimes will be pushing the line as far as what societal norms are or what to be viewed. You all, I'm not a smart person, and I don't know a whole lot about art, but I do know that there's some art that I don't want to look at for a bunch of different reasons, and I especially don't want my children looking at it either. I see this bill as a very reasonable approach towards resetting the standard of what we need to have in our school libraries. I think it's very reasonable. Now, as a former teacher, I used to send letters home saying, "Hey, listen, we're about to cover World War I. I'm about to show them some of the conditions that existed." And I will tell you to this day, the students that had me 15 years ago will still tell you the pictures of what trench foot looks like. If you don't know what that is, go ahead and Google it. It's pretty gross. Make sure that you haven't eaten anything recently. I actually had a parent reach out to me and say, "My child still will not eat baked potatoes for that reason." I sent letters home. The parents knew what was coming. When we covered World War II, I showed clips from a Band of Brothers because that relationship, I wanted my parents to know what was going on. And that's how the system is supposed to work. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you, fast forward to today, time has moved so quickly, society has changed so fast. It changes so fast now that we literally are bracing for impact. I mean, we all probably have a Facebook page. Ask how many 15-year-olds have Facebook pages now. We're all boomers, you all. We're all boomers. That time has passed them. The point I'm making is I do truly believe that this bill is a very reasonable approach towards resetting that. The images that I've seen, the books that are out there, I see that as a problem today. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you, I'm not going to stand here and talk about what issues. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, as a former school person or a current school person, what I see happening once this bill gets signed into law. I do see a tough year of book reviews. I see a lot of conversations with parents and schools, principals, school boards. I see some books being removed, and rightly so, for content that reasonable people would deem inappropriate for kids, not developmentally appropriate. I also see book companies who want to make a profit creating book lists that address issues that are prevalent in our schools, like students of all categories. I see them being better about that, being better vendors. I also see school districts being proactive. I see school media specialists, once this bill is signed into law, evaluating their book titles and discussions going on around as far as appropriateness. I see a lot of very proactive approaches, because I'll go ahead and tell you, schools don't just sit back and wait. They will be proactive. And I know we've heard a lot of conversations tonight, and we're talking about schools, and we're talking about what we're trying to do here. And I can go ahead and tell you, there's so many events that I cannot forget. I wish I could forget, of dealing with the child abuse and neglect that so many people have mentioned today. I can't forget those things. And I was the person, as the principal or the teacher or the coach, who was the only one that could get them help. The only one. Not their relatives, not their religious figures, no one. It was me as the school-based personnel. So let's go ahead and stem the tide of that conversation. We have to work together. The purpose of this bill is for our families and our schools to work together. It cannot be one or the other. It has to be a team. We will not be successful with this if conversations don't occur and we start working together. It is not one versus the other. We have to continue those conversations. We have to talk about that. We have to repeatedly talk about that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm also going to say this, and this is the last in closing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm not concerned about this bill. I am. I do believe that there will be book titles that will be removed that might not necessarily be removed across the state. I am concerned. The gentleman from Jefferson, I do believe there are going to be topics that are going to be discussed and removed about content. I do believe that there are going to be books removed that are going to put our students in a negative position when they go to take standardized tests. I do believe that's going to happen. But the assurance that I'm going to make to this body and to everybody listening is that I will be monitoring this, and I will be making sure that the intent of this bill to age appropriate and make sure that content and topics are what our kids need to be seeing. And I'll go ahead and say it, the child pornography is removed from our schools. That is an assurance I am making, and that is where I stand with this, and that is why I'm supporting this bill. This is not something I'm going to vote on and then walk away from. I will be paying close attention to this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.